Very recently, the Supreme Court decided to strike down the overall cap on donations to candidates, making it even easier for the rich to influence our elections. And much more important and more ominous than that, they strengthened this very limited version of this very limited definition of corruption. And what would seem to be corruption to many of us no longer qualifies as such to the Supreme Court. And you can be damn sure that that definition is going to be used in future rulings to take away even more of the caps and regulations on massive donations. But to give you an idea of how dangerous this is, let's do a little case study together. We're going to look at a man. You might have heard his name before. His name is Sheldon Adelson. He's a major contributor to Republican political policies and also to individual candidates. And recently, just about a week ago, something happened where his casinos, the stock price went up, and he made, in a very short period of time, just a couple of days, $2.1 billion. He's not worth $2.1 billion. He's worth far more than that, but he made that in just a couple of days. Now let's take a look at what he would be able to do with that money if he was to decide to donate a whole bunch of it to Republican politicians. He could give $1 million to every single Republican House and Senate candidate in every single election cycle for the next 170 years. Now, $1 million for a Senate candidate is not by itself enough to win an election, but it's a damn good start, and it's a very good start for a House candidate. He could do that with just the money he made last week alone. To put it in a more recent historical perspective, the $2.1 billion that he gained over those 2 days is more than 4 times the total amount of money former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney spent in his unsuccessful bid for the White House in 2012. Mitt Romney spending $433 million, an astronomical amount of money for any politician to spend. He could fund that 3 times over just with what he made in that previous week. And again, so what did he actually do? This is hypothetical. What did he really do? In the 2012 election, he spent about $150 million seeking to influence elections. So when we talk about the potential damage that the Supreme Court has done and will continue to do to our democracy, and the potential damage that these massively wealthy Republican donors can make single-handedly, we're not talking about small sums of money. We're talking about historic, almost unimaginable sums of money that they could spend.
wolf-pack.com. But the thing is, we can get you guys going. But what happens now is, I'm thinking of, when we talk about all the different ways he could have spent and who he could have influenced and who he could have bought. Let's get real. I was thinking of, what could you do about in communities? What could you do with schools, kids, education system? Things that actually shape our country. The $150 million he spent in the last cycle. I mean, I know that the other hypotheticals were based on the $2.1 billion added to his net worth, by the way. Again, I know you pointed that out.
Of which it's about $40 billion right now, give or take.
Amazing. I mean, I was trying to think, okay, if I had enough money that I literally couldn't think of enough ways to spend it, how could I do something to change at least my little country outside of the world? So I mean, it goes to things like that where you can actually see ways schools can be shaped. Maybe you can put people on these projects for each one of these schools. I'm talking just $1 million to each school. And maybe that's not enough, at least to sustain something far enough, but to get something going where you're trying to change something in the country. And maybe I'm not, giving enough to do such a thing. But when we're thinking about this type of thing, you can't figure any other ways to spend it. Why? What does it hurt to actually try and change the country for the better? To get it back, what does that do for you?
Well, obviously you're not Sheldon Adelson, and obviously Sheldon Adelson is not you or the vast majority of people. I think the vast majority of people would say, oh yeah, I actually get a tax break from all of this stuff, so I'm going to give it to some people to help them do better. But that's not what Sheldon Adelson is about. I'm sure he does it only for the tax deduction. And right, from what I understand, when all of the potential Republican candidates for presidents went to Vegas to sort of bow at and kiss the feet of the god of money, Sheldon Adelson, that he was looking to see who is going to be most helpful to him to making money. Not because he thinks, oh, this will be great for the country, it'll be great for Sheldon Adelson. And that, I think, is at the core of why these campaign finance rules, while they weren't very good, actually helped to sort of hold back the tide of the oligarchy. And now, as you said, half of the Supreme Court is dismantling these protections one by one, and we are rapidly losing any control over that. So that's That's why wolf-pack.com. Wolf-pack.com.
Yeah, I think a
I
lot
said
of
it twice,
reviewers are
so-
now drunk at this point,
Okay,
actually,
here we
if
go.
they've been doing shots.
Aren't you imagining how depressing of a life that is? So all you think about is then creating more billions of dollars to your billions of dollars. You're not doing anything anymore. Isn't that
It's an
depressing?
addiction.
No, there
It's
you
an
go.
You don't even
It
see it
probably
anymore.
is.
Yeah. So I mentioned in the beginning of this story sort of the definitions, and I want to be a little bit clearer about that. And so corruption by itself could mean a lot of different things. And over the course of history, especially since about 1963, it's meant a couple of different things to the Supreme Court. And so you can imagine sort of a bribe, giving money directly to a politician in response to him saying, I will do such and such for you if you give me the money. Obviously, that's corruption. But also donating $10 million to a candidate's war chest and then having some meetings with him. It's a little bit different. Now, what is corruption? The Supreme Court, in their McCutcheon ruling, seems to believe that only the most explicit and clear and comic book version of corruption is actually corruption in the eyes of the Supreme Court, in the eyes of the candidates, in the eyes of the population. They said that giving all of this money, it doesn't even create the appearance of corruption. That's just demonstrably not true. I feel like it's pretty damn corrupt. I think I can get a few other people, perhaps in the audience, to corroborate me. So apparently it does create the appearance of corruption. And so really fast, I've been working on a bit of an idea because we have a lot of rights that are stipulated in the Constitution. And so they'll say that, you know, if money is speech, which I don't agree with, but if money is speech, then giving a bunch of money is just exercising your freedom of speech. But we know that freedom of speech is not unlimited. You can't scream fire in a crowded theater. And the reason you can't is because that would do harm. If this is speech, even if you believe that bullshit argument, then perhaps giving unlimited money would cause harm as well. You have a right to bear arms in this country, but if somebody had a gun that if you pulled the trigger, it would blow up the entire country, we wouldn't let them keep that gun. I don't care what's in the Second Amendment. And I think that the disparity between a regular gun and that gun is no larger than the disparity between the speech of an average American and a man like Sheldon Adelson who can fund every election for the next 2 centuries.
They create an alternative universe, you know.
Exactly. It no longer means anything like what the founders thought it would mean when they wrote those rights into the Bill of Rights. And so I think that even if you believe they're framing that it's speech, it's obviously speech that can be regulated because of the demonstrable harm that it's doing to American democracy.
And one last thing about that, just remember that the mainstream corporate media is going to get a huge payday out of this McCutcheon ruling, that there's going to be a ton of TV ads that are going to onslaught the airwaves between now and the 2014 and from there on out. So you're not going to find a whole lot, I think, of negative coverage about it.
Yeah, and they need that money, okay? If you're going to put a reporter in a flight simulator pretending he's on 370 for a couple of months, that costs a lot of money, okay? You need those ad dollars.
And if you've done that to build some more viewership, you can, you know, your ad buys be like, you know, how many viewers we've had during this stretch last year. Give us some of that campaign money, your ad money, and it all comes back to making money.
Exactly.
Obviously.
A whole bunch of people get
I know we're
rich.
stating the obvious.
A whole bunch of people get rich. Unfortunately, not the average American, and he also doesn't even have the benefit of a working democratic government to fall back on.